other academic I say platforms or academic discussions nowadays. First, let me share why this topic matters. Why is it important that we talk about agriculture? Why is it important to talk about the importance of women in agriculture? Globally, the significance of women in this industry can be represented in the data of the Food and Agriculture Organization, which shows that women represent about 43%, almost half of the global agricultural labor force. Despite their vital role in agriculture, women farmers frequently face systemic barriers such as limited access to land, credit, technology, and decision-making power. Um, More importantly, I think it's very important for us to realize, not just to realize, but to problematize that we have been facing so many challenges in our agriculture industry in the Philippines. Because because I study foresight, my professors would always say that 3 decades, 5 decades ago, you will never realize that these changes or the challenges or changes that has been happening in the 21st century is happening. Because who would have thought that we will no longer or we will have a population in this generation who is no longer interested in agriculture? Um, we have an aging population of farmers. This is worrying because I think the last article that I've read about this issue says that the mean age of our farmers in the Philippines has an average or has an age of ranging from 50 years old to 55 years old. They're very old. 5 decades ago, we thought we will not have problems with the number of people who will be involved in agriculture because we assumed that the children of these farmers will continue the legacy or the livelihood of their parents. However, due to the drivers of change or uncertainties that has been going on through the past years, these youths has decided to go out of their provinces and to work in the city. Aside from the problems of the aging population, we have also problems in climate change. And I think we have been, not just the farmers, but even us, people has been experiencing a lot. We have been experiencing the impacts of climate change. But later on, I will talk more about the experiences of women um, um, or the challenges that they face due to the impacts of climate change in the Philippines. The loss of interest, we talked about this already. The loss of interest of youth towards agriculture. There are the changes that we faced for the past years has influenced so much how the youth perceive quote unquote work or livelihood. No, I think that this generation or you guys here with me today will understand that you can make a livelihood out of taking a video of yourself on TikTok or in YouTube or on Facebook. But years ago, it's not like that. No? And also, I think one of the things that I would like to highlight in this presentation is that women or we have been experiencing a limitation of women's participation in agricultural activities. And this threatens our agriculture industry. When we talk about the historical development of rice farming or agriculture in the entire country as an archipelago, I remember this very interesting article by Professor Aguilar, Philomeno Aguilar, I think, which is entitled Rice and Magic, if I remember it correctly. And he traced the historical importance of women in agriculture before we were even colonized by the Spaniards up to the modern times. And he said there, before we were colonized by the Spaniards, women played the most important role in rice farming to the point that they will let these grains rot, kung walang available na babae to harvest the crop, they will not harvest it. Hayaan mong mabulok because the spirit who lives inside the rice wants, people in the community to follow yung kagustuhan nila. At ang gusto nilang nag-harvest sa palay ay babae. But when we were colonized by the Spaniards, what they wanted, money from crops, from cash crops. That's why we call it cash crops. To the point that they disregarded how we see agriculture in order to profit or to be more productive, no, in terms of our agriculture economy. Hayaan na yung mga babae na yan, isama na yung mga lalaki magtrabaho na sa palay, hindi na kailangang maghintay pa ng babae. Kasi kailangan nating kumita, no? Kailangan nating isalba yung ekonomiya ng Pilipinas at yung colonial government ng Espanya dito sa Pilipinas. When the Americans came, some changes, some agricultural machineries were introduced, but still the same. I would like to think from how I read the historical development of agriculture in the Philippines, even the historical development of agriculture or rice farming in Nueva Ecija, women were disregarded for the sake of productivity. And so, yeah, I would like to arrive with an introduction of what Nueva Ecija is. I'm not very sure if Nueva Ecija is familiar with the people who lives in cities like Manila, but I hope it is. But Nueva Ecija is a place or is a province which treats agriculture as the primary or one of the primary source of its livelihood. One of my economics professor in Thailand once asked me, when I ask you about the backbone of your economy, what would you answer? And I told him, because I came from Nueva Ecija, I came from the province, I told him that agriculture is definitely the backbone of Philippine economy. But he would always tell me and make fun of the conversation and say, if you live in the city, you will say the primary or the backbone of the Philippine economy is manufacturing, because of the number of manufacturing houses that we have in the city or in our cities like Manila or Cebu. But still, as of this moment, I would like to think that agriculture, from long years back, is the backbone of our country's economy. I would like to begin the my discussion on the challenges faced by women on their access to resources. Wait, let me see this. Okay. First of all, I would like to begin the problem or the list of problems that I have, that is included in the findings of my previous research. I would like to begin with the problems with their access to land. Okay. I think it's just, I don't know, common sense that you cannot or we cannot do agriculture without land. No one can ever do agriculture with air or with just mere water. So we need land to do or to perform agriculture. It's very interesting that 2.33 million women and 7.93 million men were employed in agriculture in the Philippines. But only 2% of women owned land. This highlights disparities in resource access and control. And I would like to connect this with my previous research on the status of land ownership in Nueva Ecija. And one of the things that I have discovered is that our culture of giving inheritance influenced so much on women's access to land. Because when I interviewed some of the landowners in the province, I interviewed some landowners from the south, the north, the east, and the west. And the commonality is that I will give my land, or they would say, I would give my land to the male members of my family because it is expected that my female or my children who are female will have their husband for them to depend to. I mean, yun ang palagi nilang sagot kung bakit na ipapamana ko yung lupa ko sa mga lalaki kong anak dahil yung mga anak kong babae ay either nakapagtapos naman ng pag-aaral or may magkakaroon naman ng asawa na pwedeng dependehan, no? And which for me, which made me arrive in a conclusion that the male members of the family are usually the top priority in terms of land inheritance. Kaya medyo dun nagkakaroon ng disparity sa distribution ng land or sa land ownership. Well, historically, when I think when the Spanish colonization, the American colonization halted in the province, those people from the province who helped either the Americans or the Spaniards as army men, as our army people, were rewarded with land. Usually ang tinatawag lang naman to be members of these groups, military groups, are men. So most of the agricultural areas or lands in Nueva Ecija were owned by men after the colonization of the Spaniards and the Americans in the Philippines, or in Nueva Ecija to be more specific. Okay, we have been using the word access and control interchangeably. Even I. Can you still hear me? Am I still audible to you? Hello?
Yes po.
Okay, thank you. Okay. When I began my research on the disparities, gender disparities of land ownership in the province, I have been using the term access and control interchangeably. But a lot of people who would study gender disparities in agriculture would say those are different things. Even the main framework that are currently used by social scientists to study gender and agriculture, the Harvard Analytical Framework. Sorry, I wasn't able to put it in my slide. Said access to land, access to credit, access to fertilizers is different from having a control over it. No? May access ka sa lupa, pwede kang pumunta sa lupa, magtrabaho sa lupa, pero iba yung control mo kung meron ka bang control sa lupa. No? Kung may kakayahan ka bang magdesisyon kung pwede na siyang ibenta or hindi, or kung pwede bang iba yung itanim ngayon at iba yung itanim bukas, magkaiba po yun. So, posible na yung mga babae ay may access dun sa lupa, pwede silang mag-participate, pero it does not necessarily guarantee that they have the capacity to decide what to do with the land. No, yun yung isang problem din na kinakaharap ng mga kababaihan pagdating sa resources. Okay? Decision making. Okay. In the case of some landowners in Nueva Ecija, female landowners rely on their husbands or the male members of their family most of the time. Lagi nilang, most of my respondents would say, I don't have to think about the workers, or I don't have to think about choosing laborers, no, or buying agricultural machineries, or magkano susweldohin ng mga nagtatrabaho sa lupa ko, no? Or ano yung mangyayari sa lupa ko in the future. The female members of the family would always say they depend, or most would say they depend on their husbands in terms of decision making, or if not their husbands, the male members of their family. Aside from that, the thing is, I have also interviewed some landowners who also have a different or a separate job, no, another job aside from being a landowner, no. They were professionals, and they would often say that they wouldn't, or they don't usually do the decisions for the land because they have another job, or they have other works, or sources of livelihood. There are issues on labor. This actually caught my interest the most of all the problems that are currently faced by female or women farmers in the province. Um, Philippine Statistics Authority in 2018 states that agricultural labor force in the Philippines is heavily dominated by men. 77% are men, and only 23% are women. Um, and when they were asked, when the farmers and landowners in Nueva Ecija were asked about their preference in choosing who would work or who would manage their land, they would always say they prefer the male workers over the female workers. No? Ang sinasabi nila ay gusto nila yung overall. No? They assume that the male members of the community has the capacity to do all the works that is necessitated in the agriculture or the entire agriculture process, no? Naiiwan or hindi na pipili masyado yung mga kababaihan because some of the male landowners would say hindi sila pwede or hindi nila kayang mag-operate ng mga malalaking makina sa farm. So we would usually choose males or men over women kapag pipili kami ng magtatrabaho sa aming lupa. Climate change. This is new. This is a new work for me. Lulu and I had the opportunity to do a workshop on climate justice at not Thammasat, but at Chiang Mai University in Thailand, and it's a very interesting workshop, and I've learned a lot. But um, I tried to touch this in this presentation because for me this is very much alarming. No? According to the World Risk Report Analysis and Prospects in 2017, the Philippines, after Vanuatu and Tonga, or Tonga is the third most vulnerable country to climate change. No? Risk and vulnerability are two different concepts. I think I hope our I think our the other presenter, my co-presenter this afternoon, knows this or specializes in concepts of climate change or vulnerability more than I. But these are two different things. I think vulnerability also talks about how capable or how ready is a country to face the impacts of climate change. But in that rank, we rank the third. And this means that poorer farmers and communities, or those poorer farmers and communities, lack resources for agricultural resources and adaptation technologies, making them more or vulnerable to natural hazards exacerbated by climate change. And this is being experienced by a lot of farmers, not just in the Philippines, but in the rice granary of the Philippines, which is Nueva Ecija. Um, Women or female members of the family would say that after flooding, after the increased magnitude of calamities or typhoons in the Philippines or in Nueva Ecija, they shoulder additional responsibilities beyond household chores, including caring for sick and elderly family members while also facing increased pressure to seek off-farm employment following severe flooding. Kung hindi na makakapagtrabaho yung kanilang mga asawa sa bukid dahil nabaha at nasira ang pananim, they will be pressured of to go out of their provinces or their places to find temporary employment. Kasi hindi sila makakakain kung wala silang source of livelihood dahil sa effects ng natural calamities. And one of the studies of Mendoza in 2025 states that women farmers in Nueva Ecija were reported to have experienced greater stress and anxiety during calamities, driven by concerns for their family's safety and the loss of rice crops which served as both a source of income and food security. No, because we're not just talking about rice as a source of money, but rice as a source of um, survival or source of food. No? Wala ka nang naibebentang rice, wala ka pang nakakain na rice due to the impacts of climate change. So, it's actually the women who shoulders those burdens as the one in charge in food preparation. Kung tatanungin mo nga yung ibang mga families when we ask them about the most important role of women in a farming household, they would say it's actually the food preparation and financial management that they do best, and they are entrusted with that. Kung magkakaroon ng problema doon, they will surely experience a lot of burdens and stress and anxiety because of that. Okay, climate change does not affect everyone equally because we receive different magnitudes of support or different magnitudes or different sources or opportunities to source out ways to cope up with the impacts of climate change. Climate change places a disproportionate burden on women who sustain both the farm and the family. Okay. Agricultural mechanization. I do not know if you are familiar. Um, okay, I want to say this first. Women find it difficult to relate to and to have access and control to agricultural machines because most of these machines are designed for men and by men. But thanks to other science and technology institutions now who would address this gap in agricultural mechanization. Salamat. I think I have read some proposals and some articles about this already. So I'm hoping for a development in the near future about this problem. But kapag tatanungin namin sila, um, gumagamit po ba kayo ng mga ano po yung ginagamit niyo po ba or minsan po ba nakakatulong po kayo sa paggamit ng mga bagong machines sa inyong lupa? And they will be shocked and they will usually laugh because they would say it's really not for us. No, it's bigger than us and we will not be able to operate it because they would say that it's the strong members, the male members of the family who can really access and control this type of resource. Women played a significant role in agricultural production when traditional farming methods and equipment were still widely used by farmers in the province. This is what we call in the province halimaw. Um, what's the direct translation of halimaw in English? Can be beast or can be monster. Some farmers would say um, they called it halimaw because it's really big and it does the work so fast. No? Kasi gawin mo siya manually. But some tenants and some farmers would say they call it halimaw, they call it beasts or monsters of the farm or the field because these machines stole their livelihood away from them. No? Mga wala kaming trabaho dahil dyan sa makina na yan, kaya halimaw ang tawag namin dyan. And some of the can I say I hope I'm allowed to say older farmers that we have encountered and interviewed. They said, before the halimaw came, we were actually sorry, we were actually engaged in agriculture. And she told us that when hampasan is still prominent in the field, we have a big role in rice farming or in the agricultural processes that time. In the left side of the screen, you can see an agricultural equipment called hampasan. Um, People who would visit our or the CLSU Agricultural Museum will find it amusing that before the combined harvester, the reaper, meron tayong ganitong equipment na tinatawag na hampasan. And how the female members of the family use this is, yung buong yung group ng stock, rice stock, ihahampas nila dyan sa hampasan, this one, para malaglag yung grains. No? They would manually separate the grain from the stalk. And they said, malaki yung role namin or we can participate because it needs a lot of people, no, to do the labor. So, malaki daw yung role nila. In the photo on your right, you can see this sieving device, sieving equipment, no? And even when I was younger, I would see the female members of my community do this in the afternoon to separate the grains from the dirt or from how do I say this? The ipa stalks, if I remember it correctly, yeah. To separate yung grain dun sa ipa. So sabi ng mga old female farmers before, nung wala pang halimaw, nung ganyan, very traditional pa lang ang way of farming, we were able to contribute. But now, because halimaw is created to be operated by men, we weren't able to participate anymore. So I hope this gives you a little picture of what agriculture looks like in Nueva Ecija before these agricultural machineries came. Okay, sorry, I consumed so much of the time, but some key takeaways. Women have long been indispensable participants in every stage of rice production. I hope you were able to remember how I discussed the historical development of the participation of women in agriculture in the Philippines and in Nueva Ecija. However, their participation is increasingly constrained by structural inequalities, labor shifts, climate change, and agricultural modernization. Addressing these challenges is crucial to sustaining both women's livelihoods and the future of rice farming in Nueva Ecija. Lulu told you already, he introduced me as a student of strategic foresight. And when I check the foresight projects of other countries, of Asian countries in agriculture, it scares me in a way because I felt like agriculture becomes a slowly dying industry for female, for women. And hopefully um sana hindi naman for everyone, no? Because no civilization in history has ever survived without food. We survived without AI. We survived without electronic cars. We survived without these things. But from the very beginning of the world, no one ever survived without food. So I hope you understand that this is a very urgent matter. And personally, I do believe after being with women farmers in Nueva Ecija or conducting researches on women in Nueva Ecija or in the rice granary of the Philippines, women can play a role in solving these problems in agriculture only if we will allow them. No. Recognizing the contributions of women rice farmers is not only a matter of gender equality, it is essential to ensuring food security and sustainable agricultural development. So I hope you have learned something from my talk this afternoon, and I'm super glad to have the opportunity to share this talk with you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Erica, for that wonderful presentation, especially that we got the chance to hear the other side of the Philippines, particularly the northern part of the Philippines, focusing on women in agriculture area, which I believe share the same interest with me. I also do research on women, but more on indigenous communities. So to discuss more about the southern part of the Philippines, let's welcome our next speaker, Mr. Roland Pereyra.
Hello, hello. I hope my voice is clear on your end. I Can I see some thumbs up if you can hear me?
Yeah, we can
Okay.
hear you, Roland.
Um, okay, for a while. Let me fix just one slide in my presentation.
Yeah, we'll be entertaining questions later on after the reactions from our reactors.
I'm ready to share my screen. Wait.
Or you can share with me the link. Is it Canva or?
It's a PowerPoint. Uh, okay. Yeah, I think I'm ready now. I hope my screen now is visible. Okay, thank you for the reaction. First and foremost, I would like to thank the organizer, especially Lulu. It's an honor to present my experience and my knowledge to share with your students as well as I'm also honored to be invited as one of the resource speakers for this lecture. And the previous one, I think it's difficult to um, Miss Erica was actually had a really fantastic presentation about the situation of our farmers and the farming industry in the Philippines. So it was really a fascinating lecture from her. I hope I can connect some of the experiences that I also had with a couple of farmers that I've worked with in Zamboanga Peninsula and other parts of the country. So this lecture is gonna be focusing on the community-based approaches towards circularity and waste reduction. On your screen, it's just a data demonstrating that, in fact, as of 2025, so yung sinabi ni Ms. Erica kanina, so that was 2017, no? But recently, we actually we are actually leading now in terms of the global risk, no? As published by the World Risk Index report. It's an annual report, a peer-reviewed report with several evidence and sources from international and national data. So we are actually top one right now in terms of risk. When we talk about risk, so it's a combination of capacities, adaptation, vulnerability. Um, these components are has certain computations to come up with us with a certain index when we talk about risk. So so out of 193, no, so top one tayo. So I think it's been 2 years already. I think when last year we were also top one. So I don't know if we are proud, no. It's something that we are leading, no, in a really really negative way. Uh, in terms of at the national scale or local scale, um, if you notice, the provinces below, Cagayan, Agusan del Norte, Pangasinan, Pampanga, and Maguindanao, what's one thing that you can find? What's something that is very common in these provinces? If somebody can just message in the chat. What do you think the most common um, area or like geographically that made these provinces the riskiest in terms of flooding. Ano sa tingin niyo yung pinaka-common nila? Commonality. Okay, going once. So I'm not seeing any messages. So actually, it's a river basin areas, no? In Cagayan, you will see the Cagayan River, the Cagayan Valley River. I mean, Agusan del Norte, the Agusan Mars. So this province in Pangasinan, you have the Agno River Basin. So ito yung mga provinces na um, merong mga malalaking rivers and tributaries. So every time that the Philippines is experiencing typhoons, so most of the rainfall will actually, for example, in monsoon season, right now we are in a habagat season. So you will notice a lot of flooding in the western part of our country, Pangasinan, Ilocos, Pampanga. So dun madalas yung flood ngayon. But when the monsoon switches into southeast monsoon, the amihan, so it's the eastern part naman ng ating bansa. So this just to demonstrate that and in the Philippines, we are experiencing over 20 to 25 typhoons. Now, if you're familiar, from A to Z actually yung ating typhoon. But not all of the typhoons are actually going to like cause severe flooding mo. Hindi siya lahat magla-landfall. But you will hear this a lot from Pag-asa. Okay, so in terms of historical data, if you can still recall, if some of you can recall the tropical storm Sendong, it happened in 2011 in Mindanao. So it was one of the devastating typhoon that occurred in Mindanao. So almost 1,300 deaths. Actually, may mga unaccounted deaths, and a lot of people were missing and injured, as well as in terms of people affected. It was over 700,000 people who were displaced by this typhoon. So geographically, Mindanao should not be affected by typhoon, right? Because normally the typhoon track normally passes across Visayas and Luzon only. No? But as what Ericka mentioned earlier and stressed earlier, that due to increasing temperature globally brought by anthropogenic human activities, so there has been like abnormalities already in terms of the normal condition, in terms of rainfall, and in terms of temperature. So it has something to do with climate change. So I will not dwell more on the scientific and technical details of it, because si Pag-asa and other scientists can discuss better. But if we're going to assess, like based on our experience, if we're going to ask our grandfathers, for example, or our grandparents, what was the situation before, they will always tell you that it's entirely different in status quo compared to like 20 to 30 years ago. So may ganong stark difference already in terms of climate. And even when farmers, when you will ask farmers, ano po yung nararanasan nyo ngayon in terms of weather, they would always say that's already unpredictable. No? Farmers are actually enriched have like vast knowledge in terms of local knowledge in terms of local weather. But disrupted na yung ganong system and indigenous knowledge brought about by climate change. So it was not just in 2011. Now, if you can remember the Typhoon Odette in 2021, so it was one of the devastating typhoon as well that hit the Surigao province and Dinagat and some portion of northeastern Mindanao. So the numbers over there. Even in Davao region recently in 2024, I hope you've seen a lot of videos as well circulating in Facebook. It was a series of LPA trough and easterly. So these are like jargons already, but essentially it's been bringing during that time. It brought a lot of volume of rainfall. So it was not categorized, it wasn't categorized as typhoon, but localized rainfall lang siya or thunderstorm. But due to the severity of rainfall or extreme weather condition, so it caused a lot of local floodings and landslide in these regions. But there were a lot of factors, not just the volume of rainfall, of course, yung urbanization, the number of informal settlers, rising number of population. So these are multiple factors. But one of the triggering factors that caused the flooding was there's strong evidence that um, the climate is changing already. The weather patterns have been unpredictable already. We can no longer prepare actually. There's a certain time, even if Pag-asa has a forecast, we cannot tell na tomorrow pwedeng umulan or in the next week, maaaring umulan ng bumuhos. So in fact, like 10 years ago, the 1 month of rainfall, yung rainfall that we are experiencing in status quo, um, in just 3 to 5 days, that's equivalent to 1 month of rainfall. Yan na yung sinasabi ng ating mga scientists. 10 years ago, hindi ganun. Like, the rainfall na naranasan natin ngayon, binubuhos na in just 3 to 5 days. But 10 years ago, it's scattered within 1 month. So ngayon in 3 to 5 days, sobrang dami na yung binubuhos niyang rainfall. Okay, so what are the flood-associated risks, no? And how does waste becomes a flood risk? In waste management, so if the households or community do not practice proper waste management, so it can clog the waterways. It can reduce the drainage capacity because the waterways are clogged. There's also a potential or risk for dengue and leptospirosis or sa mga health risk. So it's actually interconnected, no? I don't know if I hope some of you have has witnessed a community na maraming basura. You live in Payatas, for example, in Payatas B, where Quezon City is dumping the garbage. You will observe there na if you're familiar, nagkaroon ng Payatas landslide. So it was triggered by heavy rainfall. So these are interconnected risks or phenomenon that essentially can cause disaster, no? Like widespread damages to population, to livelihood, to infrastructure. So that is why we have to approach these issues through a community-led approaches and circularity. So I will dwell on that later on. Earlier, we've demonstrated already that we are leading in terms of risk. So even in plastic pollution, we lead that as well now in the Philippines. So about 5 metric tons of plastic waste are actually leaked into the ocean. Parang illustratively, let's imagine if 1 metric ton, let's imagine it's 1 football field, o isang metric ton. So just to visualize what 1 metric ton means. So that's the plastic waste na yan, yung mga plastic bottles. It's a different, an entirely different discussion when we talk about plastic sachet. So these are mga maliliit na sachets. May mga chichirya natin. So that's 1.7 metric tons. So that's about 3 to football stadium. So like just to illustrate how that looks like. And then in terms of global contribution to global plastic population, so top 3 tayo. So we're still in the top 10, no? Negatively. So nakakalungkot. And in fact, in Southern Mindanao, there was a study conducted in 2024. They assessed the debris in the coastal rivers inland. They did a transect study in Davao City, about 100-kilometer transit study in Davao City. So they discovered that about 14,000 of waste were actually there. No, apparently it's not just within the Davao City, but it's a transboundary issue, meaning the waste are not just within coming from Davao City, but it came from elsewhere pa, no, from the neighboring towns and provinces in Davao de Oro, um, and in Agusan. So the hotspot was actually in Davao City. So imagine if that's that portion of Mindanao, may ganun na siyang there's an hotspot already in that area. So what more in other portion of our country? So in fact, in Isabela City, Basilan, we will going to conduct a study as well, a similar study like this, to identify the hotspots of plastic waste or marine litters in the coast of Basilan province. So in terms of national scale, um, annually in Metro Manila alone, no, that's about what 2 metric tons of waste. So sobrang dami niya, no. Imagine 2 football field na tambak na waste, Metro Manila. And it's projected to increase each year. No, there's a correlation kasi between a number of the correlation between population and waste. So since the population of the Philippines is increasing, so does the waste generation. So when population increases, you will also increase the consumption. You will also increase the generation, not just for plastic or for biodegradable waste. So in the next 5 to 10 years, it is projected that it will increase. So the question now is how can we reduce or how should we address that problem? So that's where the extended producers responsibility act was enacted, no, by the Congress. I will expand that later. So in terms of policies, to address the risk or the vulnerability that we experience in terms of climate change and disasters, natural hazards. So there are a policy foundation that we have to implement. No? First is the policy on the RA 9003. So in fact, that's over 25 years already. Ang tagal niya ng batas, but still there are a lot of gaps in terms of the implementation aspect of this policy. So in fact, the barangay level, dapat meron tayong, the barangays should establish their own material recovery facilities, should also require segregation at source. Ibig sabihin, each household, every single household in your barangay should segregate your waste. Yung ano yung nabubulok, yung hindi nabubulok, special waste, hazardous waste, etc. But malaki pa rin yung gap. A lot of households are still not practicing segregation. Even myself, no, I would say I'm guilty. No, sometimes I forget to segregate the waste. Second is the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction Management Act. So at the barangay level or the community level, there must be established barangay committees. So to complement the role of the city, towns, municipalities in terms of implementing disaster preparedness, awareness about disasters, climate change, etc. And the committees must ensure that the planning process should be participatory and inclusive, meaning it shall not be planned by the barangay officials only. No, it should be participatory. You have to invite the farmers, you have to invite women, you have to invite representative from the youth sector, etc. And lastly, the extended producer responsibility gap. This is relatively new. This particular law or policy dwells on obliging the big manufacturers like Nestle, Coca-Cola, because they are the major producers or manufacturers of waste. No, plastic bottle, when you talk about plastic bottles, Coca-Cola, Nestle, plastic sachet, Nestle. So they have, this policy has inscribed certain provisions that mandating these corporations to recover their waste. Um, One basic example is if you see your plastic bottle, for example, yung Coca-Cola na bottle, you will see there 100% recycled. So because that's one of the mechanism of this policy that Coca-Cola company should recover their waste and recycle them. So para hindi siya nag-leak lang, not all waste are leaking into the ocean. So that's one of the mechanisms that obliged enterprises or corporations are doing to reduce plastic leakage. So what are the case studies from Mindanao? In Zamboanga City, there's a Red Cross partnership, um, barangay bang barangay. So it was actually launched in 2023, and I think it's still ongoing right now. Recently, I came across a Facebook post in this on your right or left. The image below, shown in the on your screen, is actually a kind of technology that shreds the plastic waste, you know, and turn the shredded plastic or yung flakes into something valuable. So it can be used, it can be sold to the Coca-Cola Foundation because binibili nila, junk shops, for instance, binibili nga nila yung mga plastic bottles and they will sell those plastic bottles to these corporations. So ganun yung supply chain. In Zamboanga City, so this is actually an early stage of implementation. Red Cross provided technology that shreds the plastic waste into small flakes or mga flakes na. And it can be used into it can be transformed into different into another product. In Barangay Mintal, in Davao, this was in partnership with GIZ, a German um, international organization, and in partnership with the local CSO there. I think it was Mother Earth Foundation, if I'm not mistaken. So they engage with the informal waste sectors. So when we talk about informal waste collectors, ito yung mga tinatawag natin basurero, basurera. No? Um, in fact, they're not just basurero and basurera. They help segregate our waste. Napakahirap to segregate. Imagine if like a pile of waste goes to the landfill, sila yung mag-segregate nun. No? And um, I don't know, in the context of Manila, that's one of the um, main livelihood of the informal waste sector, no, yung mga basurero, basurero natin. So, they are collecting waste, yung mga pwedeng ibenta from the landfill, and they will sell this waste to the junk shops. That's how they earn money. That's how they um, earn money and buy food, no, to survive daily. And mostly, we treat them as something na indignified work, but in fact, it's an honest and actually a dignified work, because they really help a lot in terms of diverting and recovering waste and preventing the large amount or waste in leaking into ocean or into our environment. The circularity in us women's enterprise. I know most of you already saw like different initiatives. For instance, in Davao City again, si Miss Elena Mabano, she founded this project where they transform the single-use plastics or plastic sachets into an eco bag, as replacement to replace the sando bags, plastic labo, etc. So this is one of the initiatives of the Women's Association in Davao City to contribute in reducing the increasing amount, volume of plastic waste. So ginagawa nilang bags, tinatahi nila. So I think marami ng ganitong initiative na not just in Davao City. Even in Metro Manila, I know in Tondo, Manila, they have a similar enterprise there where they turn plastic waste into eco bag. So in terms of these are samples or evidence already only, no, um, where we can treat them as pilots projects. However, despite the efforts done by different organizations, associations, women's associations, youth organizations, there were still gaps in terms of um, properly implementing the policy. So I think this is up not just in Davao City, but across highly urbanized cities. So you would still notice na talagang may basura pa rin, no? Even if we are doing really good in terms of hiring manpower, in terms of issuing citation ticket to penalize the violators, um, malaki pa rin yung gap, no? For example, limited enforcement workforce. In Zamboanga City, we still experience this kind of challenge. We cannot catch every violators, no, and there are also cultural challenges as well. So I heard in Basilan, if you're going to issue a citation ticket, um, a certain person violated the waste management, you can be possibly killed. No, may mga ganong cultural barriers as well. Kaya um, yung solid waste management implementation is somehow marami siyang bottleneck. And then secondly, um, supposedly barangay should cooperate, right? Barangay to barangay. But in my experience, I saw a certain incident whereby a certain barangay actually threw the garbage on another barangay. So ayaw niyang mapunta sa kanya yung fault. So ganun din yung mga instances. Which is nakakalungkot, no? Which is supposed dapat sila yung nagtutulungan because barangays are the frontliners sa lahat ng programs ng national and local government. Thirdly, and this is still the most common and prevailing problem, is the weak segregation at the household level. So households are the primary waste generators, no, nationally. So bawat bahay sa atin, imagine we are over 100,000 in terms of population, 100 million in terms of population. So if you're going to average that by 5, so may na ako sa math, but sobrang dami ng household, no? Let's just say sobrang dami ng household in the Philippines. And I think at over 50% ay nagpa-practice ng segregation. So it still remains one of the prevailing problems in terms of waste management. So I'm gonna discuss now some applications as well where I specifically work. So in Isabela City's Basilan, so you will find that in your maps, you will find that on southern part of the Philippines in Mindanao. So it's actually previously it was part of the Bangsamoro region, but right now it's administratively under Region 9. So hindi sila bahagi ng Bangsamoro region. It's home to indigenous Yakan, so very rich and buhay pa yung kultura ng Yakan and Bajo communities in the island. So it's actually one of the pilot areas of our project under the European Union Green Economy Partnership. So what we're doing now, as an advisor to LGU Isabela City, is we're applying the community-based approach. So it's a bottom-up approach where we engage the community at the same time engaging the local government unit or the city level. So by transforming plastic and organic waste into something valuable. So I will demonstrate later. So just recently, so the title of our portfolio in Isabela City is Happy Isabela Circle. So Happy in Yakan means good riddance, happy. So that's how we branded our portfolio. So holistic approach for plastic reduction and inclusive innovation, creating economic value through resource recovery and community-led empowerment. So recently, we just did the waste characterization and analysis. So what we did here, we collected the sample size we did a sample size and in from the household, total household, and we collected their waste every day. So this just I think this was yesterday. So ang ginawa nila is they characterize and analyze what kind of waste that households are generating every day. So makikita nyo dyan, may plastics, meron pa dyan mga pagkain, may mga palat ng lanzones, plastic bottles, etc. So it's actually a variation of waste. Which is supposed to be not to be the case. It should be segregated. Plastics only. Biodegradable or nabubulok lang dapat. So, but this happened in Isabela City, Basilan. The another photo, it is the black soldier fly facility. I hope you've heard about the black soldier fly. So it's actually a fly, a kind of fly that bioprocess the organic waste. So kinakain niya yung mga organic waste and food waste. And the fly itself can be used as an organic feeds, no, sa mga alagang for poultry, for chicken, for fish pond. So it's a technology to reduce the organic waste, food and biodegradable waste. Yung mga leftover food natin sa kitchen, kakainin niya yun. No, but this different from the housefly. Kasi yung black soldier fly, mamamatay siya after 10 days. Yung housefly, mas mahaba yung life cycle niya. So less yung harm niya, biological risk. So this one, we visited Davao City. There is a private company there. So yung plastic waste, ginagawa nilang tables. No, ginagawa nilang table, ginagawa nilang chairs, and other appliances. So imagine na lang mga materials that is made of lumber. So we can produce those appliances or stuff made of 100% plastic waste. So yeah, that's part of the peer-to-peer learning with the local government of Isabela City. So essentially, there are three major components of what we're doing in Isabela City. One, we transform the plastic waste into plastic lumber and planks. So, but we are still at the earliest stage of our implementation. So hopefully by next year, we will be going to purchase the equipment and start processing, start implementing the project. Tapos, secondly, organic or biodegradable waste turn into animal feeds and pellets. Third is coconut waste into cocoa fiber and charcoal briquettes. So the community aspect or lens of for this project is we will going to engage the Yakan and Badjao weavers kasi magagaling mag-weave yung Badjan and Yakan in Isabela City to help us produce geonets. So hopefully familiar kayo sa geonets. Makikita nyo yan sa mga slopes to prevent landslide. So what we're going to do, gagamitin namin yung coconut waste. There's a certain technology that processes the coconut waste na magpuproduce siya ng cocoa fiber, and we're going to gagawa kami ng fish nets. So that's one. And women yung magiging primary partners namin in producing fish nets. Second ay yung marine trash trap, marine litter traps. So kung familiar kayo sa traditional na net, to trap the marine litter or marine waste. So ang gagawin namin is made of coconut. So the primary partners in this initiative would be the indigenous women. So that's in the pipeline in terms of project implementation. So just for the closing thought, in terms of natural hazards and climate change, Mindanao can no longer assume that kami dito sa Mindanao, we can no longer assume that the storm won't come again. So we should anticipate the storm will happen again. So the question now is, how can we adapt? How can we prepare? So, but for you students, so in terms of waste management, I hope you will consider or practice segregate and compost and reuse. Because you may think that's a small action, but it's actually a huge contribution in the overall waste pollution and the waste issues that we have been experiencing in the Philippines and the waste issues worldwide. So you may start at your home, university classroom. So I think it's hindi wag niyo isiping maliit na bagay. Small is actually a huge contribution to the overall picture of waste issues or waste problem globally. So I think that's my last slide. Once again, thank you for your attention. Um, yeah. So, and thanks again for the organizer for organizing this fantastic platform, no, for everyone to be capacitated about pressing issues that we have been experiencing in the Philippines.
Yeah, thank you so much, Roland, for sharing your interesting topic that talks about climate change in southern part of the Philippines. So to move further, let me just share my slide. Let me just share my slide again. Okay. Okay, to also help us analyze this presentation by Miss Ericka and Mr. Roland Pereyra, we have reactors from the School of Arts and Sciences, starting off with Associate Professor John Adrian Per and Assistant Professor Rodfield Bertolo. Yes, can we have Mr. Adrian Per for the reaction?
Yes, thank you, Lulu. Good afternoon to everyone. Good afternoon to our speakers, and thank you for your sharing and your presentations. No, I'll just make my reaction short and sweet, and um, bit of a interjection of concepts and ideas now in relation to history and culture. So, am I audible? So, good afternoon again, once again to everyone, and as for my reaction, I think the two presentations today engaged in the idea of decentering. As much as the title of today's webinar implicitly poses north and south, meaning outside of the center and beyond locations and spaces. The presentations also focus on decentered elements of society in relation to agriculture's risks and communities. For one, the first presentation focuses on women in agriculture, which is a field that is primarily linked with men. I guess there's a need to critically discuss or intervene on why agriculture in the Philippines is a field that is related to men. But initially, I think that we can talk about it on the idea of why we need to designate men and women as pre-adjectives to, for example, the word farmer or magsasaka in Filipino, which, as we all know, possesses no gender. But I also guess that that speaks of the dilemma, especially in relation to the roles of women, often undervalued and overlooked in the development of agriculture. The limitation is possibly the answer to why the use of pre-adjectives is necessary. And looking wider in the picture, moreover, the idea of women being overlooked in agriculture spans a bigger dilemma in relation to women's access to land, but also to anything in general. This speaks of them being visible but also invisible, wherein they can do labor on lands, actually do agriculture, have a bit of an access, but also do not have control over such. And it is within these ideas that presentations like this are important to highlight, as they provide us with a voice, no matter how little, for women as farmers and for women and their contributions to Philippine society. The last presentation is on the idea of risk, climate change, and communities. I think the main idea is vulnerability more than the hazardous location of the Philippines. Once again, it relates the idea of decentering in the sense of stressing the idea of group or communal-based practices rather than individuality, and its basis on community experiences. We all know that this is an authentic and culture-based way of Filipino society wherein uh, pakikipagkapwa or the idea of shared belonging or shared identity is highlighted. Kapwa as as conceptualized by psychologist Julio Enriquez, is important in such ideas of waste management and risk reduction, as it connotes to individuals who also view other people in the same manner they view themselves, more than, of course, using indigenous technologies of risk reduction. In basic terms, since we view ourselves as others, waste-related actions and risk matters are put into personal experiences and thus lead to a more effective, if not progressive, treatment of environments. In a more striking sense, Kapwa is also a shared identity not just within people or communities, but also a shared identity with the nature or the environment, treating the latter or the environment as we treat the former or ourselves. Hence, the idea of the caring of oneself is also the caring of nature, which the last presentation reminds and emphasizes. And it is within these matters that the social, political, and historical consciousness provide important knowledge and ideas, no, for everybody. And as we all know, knowledge is power. And knowing these issues within Philippine spaces, such as the experiences of women in agriculture, vulnerabilities, and risk, can aid in providing alternative technologies of thinking and futures that can help resolve dilemmas that Filipino societies are currently facing, especially right now with the issues of Paxilica, intense La Nina, El Nino, issues of flood control, and others. That is all for my reaction, and good day to everyone.
Thank you so much, Adrian, for that wonderful reaction. Can we have now Rodfield for your reaction? Bill, we can't hear you.
All right. Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Miss Ericka and Miss Roland. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. No, so I just want to make my reaction very short because Sir Adrian already explained a very complex, no, perspective. But I really love how Miss Ericka, no, how I really love how you talk about farming because it's really it's hate so close to home for me because my father was a farmer too, and I still remember when I was younger helping out in the fields and getting my hands dirty planting and tending to rice myself. So actually hearing you share all this makes me feel so seen and amazed because this issue could not be more timely or important for our country, but actually it really or it truly breaks my heart that so many our leaders now many our leaders nowadays seem to prioritize building BPO centers over strengthening our agricultures. So when we are archipelago, with so much land, we have a lot of potential to grow more than enough food for all of us. So based on your discussion a while ago, Miss Erica, it reminds me so deeply that food security is not just about having rice on our table, but it's about honoring the people who work so hard to grow it. So that line you mentioned or you said a while ago that access is one thing and control is another. That's really stuck with me the most. Just being there, doing all work doesn't mean you get or say or the power to lead. So when we push women to the sidelines and let our farming tradition fade away, so we lose so much, more than just harvest. We lose a huge part of who we are as a people, and we will never build a truly secure future if we leave half of our farmers, then especially women farmers. So when I think about, I think Sir Adrian mentioned a while ago, when I think about big companies like, the ongoing controversy, the ongoing controversy about Paxilica taking over the land just to make money. So it really hurts, and I hope our young ones, we need to be aware of that issue, and also uh, the women nowadays, we have the power because that's the concept now of the word inclusion. So we are now inclusion. I'm so happy that you empower the women in the field of agricultural industry, because that's really a misconception, no, for women, not women's only for household chores. And also one thing that when I was presenting my research paper during this MEC, I presented about the value of jong. No, that's a jong. That is a concept of ban of attachment. And I hope, no, some of you could relate that. I think the problem nowadays of our new generation is they don't actually know the values of our ancestors. That's why when the globalization comes in, it's easy for them to change, their identity. That's the problem now of globalization, because they want to copy the Westerners. They want to sound Westerners or their culture. That's part of cultural homogenization. So with that, I also you mentioned about modern equipment like halimaw machine. Okay, so it's built for the women halimaw machine. Actually, I could relate about hampasan, because hampasan in my hometown, which is in Negros Islands. Actually, during hampasan, that's part of our bonding or a sense of bayanihan, because we ask our neighbors to help each other. So I hope we could also empower that kind of practice. But there is no problem when it comes to industrialization, or when the age of we call that mechanization. But I think we need to reclaim the values that has been forgotten by our new generation nowadays. So, however, for Sir but I'm just later I will ask question with you, Miss Ericka. However, for Sir Roland, I'm just amazed about you mentioned about it's your discussion a while ago. You talk. It's really opened our eyes, because I learned that our country is one of the most disaster prone in the world, and in our own trust is making floods even more dangerous. And some of us all know that we are sachet capital of the Philippines. And we're so happy because you have a lot of, project. You have a lot of initiative. And we could collaborate for our NSTP students for this kind of program, because that's really something we can collaborate at this time of innovation, because we are now in the collaboration age to survive. Okay, that's it. Thank you, Sir Lulu, and everyone.
Okay, thank you so much, Phil, for that wonderful reaction. So just to summarize what we have discussed, I think the discussion from Miss Ericka and Roland actually showcase or highlight some of the challenges that we are experiencing in the Philippines, particularly like the climate change, the gender role when it comes to women, socioeconomic status and the disparity, how it actually affect or becomes a contributing factor in terms of whether or not a person will actually experience the effect of climate change. We were also able to talk about the food security and the kind of discipline among us in terms of the waste management. And lastly, we were also able to discuss opportunities from different indigenous communities, like using the context of Isabela Basilan on how they have provided opportunities for the Yakan people. So at this point, we will have question and answer portion for our speakers from the audience. So if you have questions, you can actually raise your hand or type it in the chat box for the questions. Anyone? Okay, I
I
think
have a
maybe some of
question,
our
Sir
audience
Lulu.
is shy. Ah, yeah.
Yeah, Sir Lulu, sorry to butt in. I have a question with Miss Ericka. Miss Ericka, have there been any programs or initiative you have offered or carried out in Nueva Ecija to empower and support your mga women, no? Or women farmers there?
Thank you, Phil. I loved your reaction. I am thankful, so happy that you were able to connect with my presentation. But yeah, honestly, in Central Luzon State University, we are surrounded by science and technology institutions with regards to agriculture. So, this my previous research was actually just to inform this institution on what's going on, and thankfully, as far as I know, they have been making a lot they have been designating a lot of their efforts in trying to solve this disparity in I think more specifically in agricultural mechanization. They're trying to make inclusive machines for women, and they are trying to address the problems faced by women in agriculture in order to attain the productivity that we actually need these days. Because again, I was talking about what I was talking about earlier. We have been experiencing a decrease in the production of rice in the province. So I think one of the things, or a lot of things, what I have talked about earlier, there are a lot of challenges and struggles that we are currently facing. But I believe that the participation or inclusion of women in agriculture will be able to at least mend those problems or those struggles that we are currently facing. So as far as I know, yes, there are a lot of cooperatives, there are a lot of technological innovations, projects, and livelihood initiatives from these institutions in order to solve these problems. I'm very happy for your reaction on my talk this afternoon. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Erica.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I also have questions for the both of you, Roland and Erica. Since your work or your presentation this afternoon focused on the experience that you had, can you share us like a significant experience in one of your maybe research or immersion that actually stayed with you until now and made you realize something to work on maybe or something that needed to be changed or what like in years of experience that you had, what that particular key study or experience in different communities that you've been to that stayed in your mind? Maybe it bothers you or maybe it still make your mind keep on thinking about that experience.
Hello, sige, sige. I think I'll answer first na lang, no? Since kaka-answer lang ni Erica sa previous question. Is my audio clear? Okay. Thank you again for the positive feedback from our reactors. First, I would say the capacity of the community. In the over like for over 5 years of my um, experience in terms of working with various communities and local governments, I think um, we don't give enough. No, when we say we don't, local government, non-government organizations, private sectors, we don't give enough agencies for our communities, women, youth, indigenous peoples, to reach their potential. Kasi untapped potential sila eh. For example, for indigenous communities, they have indigenous knowledge long before the technologies that we have right now. In fact, in terms of predicting local weather, for example, they have this knowledge already that has been passed on generations from generations. In terms of waste management, in fact, in terms of culture, I like what Rodfield John mentioned earlier about the pakikipagkapwa. In fact, we already been practicing waste reduction practices like yung deposit return, yung naalala niya yung bote na we are using the tanduay bottle for our oil, cooking oil. So we've been doing those practices already. But somehow nawala siya no in status quo. That's why community participation is really critical no? Sa lahat ng design, planning implementation, program design, even monitoring. When we engage communities, when we work with them, when we design with them, when we talk with them, we consult them, It's how we make our projects and our program more meaningful. Kasi multi-stakeholder na siya. So yun yung I think one that still stuck with me even until now. No? Yung potential ng community in terms of transforming the landscape of development.
In my case, I think um, very simple, but I think this one stayed with me after I had this realization. How I see rice. How we see rice. It's a product, we eat it, we love it. But after all of these years that I've been studying rice farming and rice farmers, I'm seeing rice now more than as a commodity, but as a product um, of people, or as a produce who came from people who continually tries to overcome these struggles just to feed the entire nation. That's for me, because I place so much significance with rice farmers, because I realize every time I'm with them, I realize that we will not be able to survive as Filipinos without them. Because in the Philippines, we cannot imagine a meal without rice. When we are asked, how do you describe a meal? It always goes with a soup or a rice. So, marami nga nagsasabi minsan when we talk about rice or rice farming in the province. Minsan, or there were days in our lives, in our childhood, minsan kahit rice nga lang eh. Even without a viand or another dish, we survive with merely rice. So I hope our students here who are studying Philippine women's universities in the city, and I love the campus. I always see it in when I ride the train. I hope you realize that rice is more than a commodity. It's a gift from these people, not just women, from the elderly who continually works hard under the heat of the sun, just to make sure that when you order in fast food chains, you will be able to enjoy your meal. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Ericka. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yeah, we have question from Mark Anthony Asis.
For Miss Ericka po, what could happen po if a woman po were given the same opportunities as man in agriculture po?
Okay. Well, after I have read an article that, sorry, I wasn't able to present it this afternoon. I think this case is in Cagayan, one of the biggest producers of rice in the country. One of the research conducted in Cagayan said, women-headed household who does rice farming as their livelihood are 5% more productive than male-led farming households. 5%. 5% is big when we talk about food supply and food production. And I would like to think that if only we will be able to provide a chance for women to perform what their capabilities in the field, I think we will be able to have an improved supply of food, not just in Nueva Ecija, but in the entire Philippines. Because when Nueva Ecija was hailed as the rice granary of the Philippines in the early 1900s, I think we supplied 20% of rice in the entire country. So just think of that. If we will be able to go back to that time when women shines in agriculture, I think it would have a positive impact, not just in our economy, but also in our society and culture. Yes.
Thank you so much, Ericka. Yeah, we have one question from Adrian.
Hello again. Good afternoon. I just want to ask a question for the two presenters related to the presence of governments, local or national governments, on the projects or the systems of agriculture. For example, in Nueva Ecija and in Basilan, or in the area of Sir Roland. So the do government support or has an initiative of services in relation to the agriculture or the risk reduction practices of the communities within your areas? Thank you.
Okay, see, I'll go first. For government's support in the implementation of the circular economy and risk reduction, um, I'm actually grateful because the chief executive of Isabela City, Basilan, is one of the four founding members of the Mayors for Good Governance. So, hanapin nyo yun sa Facebook no, Mayors for Good Governance. Essentially, these are local chief executive officials that are who are advancing the good governance program in the Philippines. So I'm actually lucky na siya yung nakakatrabaho ko. In terms of support, in fact, they just um, recently they just approved our request to provide a counterpart for a solar power facility. No, in order to operationalize the equipment that the European Union will provide to support and to um, support the participation of community in terms of livelihood, yung crafting, manufacturing the cocoa fiber, the plastic lumbers. So one of the prerequisites ay to establish a three-phase solar power. So that's about 15 to 20 million. So it's actually a significant amount, no, from their local revenues. So that's one thing that I'm really grateful for sa Isabela City. But previously, it's quite challenging, no, sa mga ibang areas that I've worked with in local governments because they always say na wala silang pera, they don't have a budget. But in reality, they have, no, they do. It's just a matter of like how they efficiently allocate and um, how they strategize the utilization of the budget. Kasi laging may budget. The question is how do you strategically utilize your budget? Yun yung challenges ng ibang LGUs. Over.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yes, I have interviewed some officials from the local agriculturist office of municipalities in Nueva Ecija, and I was informed that they have been very active in providing subsidies, fertilizers, seeds, trainings, and workshops among farmers in Nueva Ecija. One thing that stood out the most was there were institutions who facilitates this training or who facilitate this training who has or which has female employees who usually leads female farmers in doing livelihood um, workshops and trainings on how they can improve their lives as a farming community or as a farming uh, an agricultural household. And I think one thing that I would like to add, if because I study foresight, right? I agree with Sir Roland. There's always a budget, but I think it's very important to know where should we put that budget, so that in the next years to come, we will be able to um, effectively manage these challenges and struggles among these farmers. So, if given a chance, I'm still studying. If given a chance, I'll be very willing to do a project on what will happen in the rice granary of the Philippines or in Nueva Ecija, what will happen to Nueva Ecija in the next 50 years, so that it will inform the government on where to put the money. Because we have to understand that there are areas that we must focus on in order to adapt to changes. So, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think we don't have enough time for more questions, but I really do appreciate your participation for this online lecture. So, just to give a brief background about this online lecture, well, I was formulating this lecture, I was thinking of what's the next online lecture that we will produce this trimester, because there's a lot of things that happening. We got busy with our job and the research that I've also been doing lately. But I've realized to come up with a talk about the northern and southern Philippines, but more focus on community experience rather than focus on academic writing. So anyway, before I present the certificate, I just like to ask our audience to actually do the evaluation using this QR code. So if you get satisfied, please or make a suggestion so that we could improve our next online lecture. Maybe at the end of August, hopefully, if we will not be busy. And anyway, I'd like to extend my deepest appreciation to my dearest friend Ericka, my co-fellow in. I met Ericka in Thailand, in Chiang Mai, and then my deepest appreciation to Roland. Roland is my long-time debate partner when I was still debating in Zamboanga. So yeah, thank you so much for accepting the invitation. So we kindly ask everyone to rate the lecture and give suggestion and comments. Anyway, so to show our appreciation, we'd like to share this certificate of appreciation. If ever you are in the Philippines or you're in Manila, please let us know so that we could send at least a little token from the Philippine Women's University. I think Ericka is in Philippines. Nandito ka ba sa Philippines?
But I'm going back to Thailand next week for the opening of the semester.
Or maybe if ever makabunta ako ng Thailand in the
Very grateful for this opportunity.
And then for Roland, if ever you happen to be in Manila, please let us know so that we can send a simple token. Anyway, just to share the certificate of appreciation, in grateful acknowledgement of his or her intellectual generosity as speaker of the topic, Walking with the Community, Stories of Service and Advocacy from the Northern and Southern Philippines, which contributed to the students' knowledge of ASEAN culture and also history, signed by me and the Dean of School of Arts and Sciences. Would like to present the certificate to Miss Ericka Buenaflor. Then the next certificate also would like to send is to Mr. Roland Pereyra. Thank you for sharing your expertise and experiences. So I think before we conclude, since we still have time, I think maybe you have a final message, Roland and Ericka.
Please give me a moment to thank all the organizers, to Philippine Women's University. Lulu, thank you very much for making this happen. I really had a fun moment with the students and our reactors. Adrian and Phil, thank you for your reactions or your response to our talk. It's very fun to have an engagement with other scholars. In the field of social sciences and the arts. Sir Roland, thank you for being with me this afternoon. It was fun being your co-presenter and I've learned a lot from your presentation. Thank you, everyone. Hope to see you again next time.
Yeah, Roland, final message.
Again, I'm really pleased that there's a certain platform, to share um, our experiences and backgrounds and our learnings that we also obtained from the community. So I commend the Philippine Women University for sharing this kind of platform. So hopefully ay matutuloy ito, tuloy-tuloy. And message for the students, so mahalin nyo ang Pilipinas. Yun lang.
Okay, may I ask everyone to open your cam? We'll just take a group photo. Phil, Adrian, Roland, if you don't mind. Okay. Okay. Please let me know if you're ready. Okay, Phil, are you ready? To my dear students, thank you so much for participating in this online lecture. And as well to the students of Adrian, thank you for participating in this event. So I hope you're all ready. We'll just take a photo. Here's another one. Yeah, we're done. Thank you so much for participating. Thank you to Roland and Ericka. See you on our next online lecture series, maybe at the end of August or first week of September. Maraming salamat. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Keep safe.